The journey was always the least exciting part. That's what I always feel like. You're shut inside a small room for a week or two while you traverse the slip space. Nothing to look at, except your own bored face in the mirror. They lowered the shutters on the observation decks while we were traveling, partially because the slipstream wasn't too interesting to look at, partially because those who did look tended to wind up bleeding out their eyes and ears, or other appendages or orifices, so you were confined to a room. Usually you could hang with the other travelers, but this time I was one of a few passengers, and the others were the type of people who'd rather bury themselves in their work while traveling than having a good time. I sighed. I was lying on my bed fidgeting with my info tab to pass the time. Not that I was going to get anything. Connection shuts off in slip space, and where I was going, all outside connection had been shut off in advance. Then I suddenly got a small alert message telling me that we had arrived. I put down the device and got up. I walked into the small, cramped bathroom adjacent to my room and turned on the mirror. It helpfully and irritatingly pointed out the dark rings underneath my 4 eyes, and how matted and dull my rust-red fur looked, how my tail and my big ears were bushy and needed to get a shave, and how I needed to cut my nails. I liked technology, but why did they have to put computers in everything? Sometimes you'd like to just have some time away from them, especially if you had to put tape over the inbuilt camera, which incidentally I had to do after finding out that the local crew usually took, well, candid 3D videos of your body for usage on the crew-only holodeck for recreational purposes. I know it gets lonely when you're in the Force, been there myself, but some things just aren't acceptable. I sighed again and got out of my bathrobe and took a shower, which would either have been comfortable or refreshing, but since this was the cheapest craft that the government could have sent, it had de-dirtifier chem showers. Efficient, true. But who wants to stand in a T-pose for a minute while they spray you with sterilizing fluid? I got dressed in a cheap black business suit. It was new, but still cheap. After all, when you're the only expert on an extremely obscure subject, so obscure I could count the number of other experts on the subject on one hand, you don't get high priority on the payroll at the Intergalactic All-Species University. Tenure is good, but when you're the least important staff member of 100.000 teachers with tenure, it's not that good. I got out and headed for the briefing room. It was good to stretch my legs. As I arrived, I was pleased to see I wasn't the last. In fact, I was the first. Typical. The other passengers were the other experts on the subject at hand. The primordial precursor civilization that had flourished briefly in the galaxy about 450 million years ago, before all other known cultures. They had left behind very little useful information archaeologically. Only their most ludicrous monuments had remained. Like the black obelisk of Thronta IV, reaching from the sea to the exosphere of that planet, it was clearly big, threatening, and to most religions considered extremely blasphemous. Or the strange temple complexes on Dron Pa Nak that covered the entire southern pole, seemingly dedicated to a strange, obese figure, with white fur and blood-red clothing. Slowly, my eccentric and obsessed colleagues joined us, and eventually, we got the meeting started. As you all know, you lot are the Tri-Galactic Federation's primary experts on the oldest known civilization, the Homolog Monument Builders, or more commonly known as the Homologs. They are almost completely unknown. Even the Archivist Foundation, who have kept records of this galaxy for the past 50 million-odd years, have not recovered a single text authored by them, a single explanation for who they were, why they disappeared, and why the galaxy seems to be littered with their monuments from end to end. The government official, Rask Olmo, the Fuervi captain of this vessel, looked down at her notes, her brown feathers ruffled on her head, her beady black eyes focusing on her set of papers, astonishingly, since most everything was electronic or hard light data these days. You've all signed the non-disclosure agreement, and you all know you'll be put into maximum sentence prison automatically if you spill a word of this without an official order from the Supreme Admiral of High Command or from 2 of the 3 triarchs of the Supreme Council. And now, we can show you why we've been so secretive. She gave a wordless command with a turn of her head, and a screen popped up in the middle of the room. It showed a decently sized planet with a partially strip-mined moon orbiting it. This system was the cause of the past couple of years of slipspace difficulties, a malfunctioning device, originally meant to hide the gravitational signs of this system and prevent the light from it being seen. It had begun leaking out unstable excess energy into the slipspace, which we all know causes high gravitational waves in there. When we managed to turn it off, we found that this system has extensive sign of habitation, and various forms of dating, uranium, carbon, solar, proved that this system was heavily populated, about 450 million standard years ago. A murmur comes up from the crowd. I myself am impressed. An actual colony of the homulogs? The chance to study it would almost be a dream come true. The system is full of ruined asteroid habitats, old decayed ships, moon mines, research stations, a partially finished terraforming project on the 4th planet. Each of you will be assigned to one project to act as the expert advisor and leader of the archaeological team for the government researchers at that location. I nodded. Made sense. All sorts of goodies. But only one team got the main prize, only one expert per team. Telascorte, to the 4th planet and its terraforming project. Yunyu the erudite, son of Maski the secretive, to the moon mine. Ossi Walfurs to the gas giant extraction facilities. Emda Morphal to the 3rd planet from the sun. I heard a groan from the other experts. True enough, all of us had wished to go there, but I drew the lucky card for once. The captain, in her deep aria voice, told the rest where to go, and then had an ensign hand us our assignments. I walked out of that room only to run into one of the other experts. "Emda, it should have been me!" he shouted at me. Well, my legs, presumably. "Taros the Willful. I didn't hand out assignments, the government did. You know that." The twitchy little scaled thing screamed at me from somewhere beneath the truly impressive amount of woolly sweaters, hats, socks, and pants he was wearing. I turned my head to one of the guards, who thankfully grabbed the little guy before he hurt himself. "Just take him where he is supposed to go. He'll be all right when he gets to work. He usually does." In a small field such as mine, people tend to be eccentric. Taros was no exception. Flirting with females 3 times his own size, trying to pick fights with pretty much anything he saw as even remotely against him, letting the students with larger mammary glands who took his classes get higher grades automatically. How he ever managed to get tenure is beyond me. I went to my cabin, gathered what small amount of things I needed, and set off for the transport. "So, what's the planet like?" I asked the pilot. "Oh, horrible. It's a warm death world, that's what it is. Half the people on the ground are biologists in ultra-survival suits. At least one of them gets eaten by the plants or the large, long reptilians every day. No casualties yet. We usually manage to get them out before they get too hurt." I gulped. A death world was always dangerous. They were usually worlds that had 5 or more extinction events since life started. I had gotten on the transport thinking that I had won the lottery, but maybe I had won a cursed prize. "Don't you worry, though. We've killed everything even remotely dangerous within 25 clicks of the site you'll be looking at today." I looked up. Today? Don't I need to see the team first? Meet people? The pilot shook the head that wasn't paying attention to piloting. "Nah, buddy. They've already started the excavation. You're here more as the person who gets to tell the other clever people about what they've dug up." I nodded, sighed, and went back down to my seat. Of course they'd already started. Governments. Either they're late and slow or they're too hasty and eager. Who knows what they could have accidentally ruined because they didn't check for geoglyphs or obscure sigils. One of the guards forming my escort, which was apparently policy, though I cannot be sure if their task was guarding me or making sure I didn't try to spill classified info. Me just taking out my device had the 2 muscular Marines get up and confiscate it. "You'll get it back when we get to HQ." They were an odd pair, a Shuriel like myself, and a Dagat bloodthirster. Sure, the Dagati were our allies now, but some still found their ritual blood drinking unnerving, especially since it used to be real blood from alien races. Nowadays it was from animals, but still, odd combo. When we finally arrived, I could see the planet. It was a warm kind of planet, very warm. The equator was pretty much entirely desert, and the poles were nearly without ice. Most of the rest was covered in bizarre jungles. Good thing we're not going down to the tropical parts of this planet. Canopy gets so thick that underneath it it's a constant night there. We sent in 3 teams there, half of one returned. That place is hell. We're going to a set of large islands on the southern hemisphere. They have the least dangerous wildlife on the planet. Considering it was a death world we were landing on, that was like the coldest place on a star. Still going to burn you. We landed in an area that had clearly been chemically defoliated. A Dagat officer was waiting for us there. Emdomorphal? I nodded as I got off the craft. Good. Follow me. I followed the stoic lizard down into a hole, which led to 2 enormous open metal doors. We passed through them, and to my surprise, the place was actually being run relatively well. I could see proper stasis units were provided for the various artifacts. And they were, for once, real and easy to classify. Metal objects, cups, ancient machinery, stone tablets with different kinds of text on them. To be perfectly honest, that made it all worth it. Texts, different alphabets. It could take years, decades, but we could finally maybe find out something about these homulogs beyond their fondness for ludicrously well-made monolithic mega-monuments. The officer led me to a circle of people, who were all looking at what appeared to be some sort of portal, round, closed, and presumably locked. The expert, said the officer, and promptly left. A stupaventu, a semi-aquatic species known for their sense of details, broke ranks and walked over to me, their wet hand reaching out. I grasped it and shook, like a proper greeting should be. You must be Emda. We're all glad you're here. That was reassuring at least. See, you're the sentient who wrote a full paper of all known words of the homolog language, the full half-dozen, and found the proper sound of them and their meaning. I nodded. True. Most of them were words that had survived somehow into the usage of the most extremely ancient languages we knew, which could not be traced back to the original speakers. Only one was still in common use. It's surprising just how old the word meant to show disappointment, afush, could be traced back to an ancient expletive of the homolog. All right. How can I help? The dozen or so scholars parted and showed an active screen hooked up to the door. Wait, that thing still works? There is still power in this place? How? The leader of the scholars spoke again. Well, it was certainly a surprise to us. The power is based on a hitherto unknown principle of physics. Somehow the generator has an entire universe locked inside it, which it is slowly using up to power the entire facility, speeding up the entropy inside of the contained universe. The power has kept this place running, but it is unknown what this complex is. We've only got access to this lobby area and the outer maintenance area. This machine needs a voice command to open in the homolog language. My 4 eyes widened in response. A language-coded key? That would be possible. Could take a while. Well, with what I know of the homolog language, it would still take the rest of my life to decode the words we have uncovered here, and any one of them could be the code phrase needed. Might as well say every word I know, just in case. The scholars chuckled slightly. Just might work. Hertzim, Kartoffel, Wind, Melon. To my utter shock, that somehow worked. The door somehow started to part, and the screen that showed the interface showed a series of symbols as the door opened. What? What's the odds of that? No, really, what are the odds of that? I said as the cold air from deep inside flew out in my face. Seriously, what are the odds? The other scholars looked at me in awe. Yeah, we got lucky today. The scholars cheered and the guards moved in closer. Relax, nothing in there can possibly be alive. It's been millions of years. We excitedly moved in. The air had the stench of stale air, impossibly old, but still more or less breathable. And cold, strangely cold for this world, where even these far southern islands were covered in warm, temperate rainforests. As we moved further inside, a crackling voice spoke in an incomprehensible language on ancient loudspeakers, though with their age, it sounded more like the voices of the dead than anything else. One of the scholars, a woolly Rushta, with his antlers and feelers, turned to me. "What do you think we'll find in there?" I shrugged. "It's certain that their civilization died out somehow. Some believe it was war, others disease, others again, that they ascended to a higher plane of existence. There are as many theories as there are experts. So long ago, and they perhaps knew, so they set this place up. In my opinion, a tomb for their race, perhaps a vault with their cultural and technological achievements, a last hold for their civilization, a final resting place of sorts. Maybe we'll just find a lot of irradiated rocks in there. Who really knows?" The other scholar smiled, imagining the possibilities. We must have walked for nearly an hour, forwards and downwards, before we came to the end of the hallway. A door there opened further, and to my utter shock, I was not greeted with artifacts, but a vast, cold chasm with only a small balcony extending outwards. "By my whiskers and my tail," I heard myself mutter. It was enormous, truly. I couldn't see the bottom, nor the other side. I could only faintly glint at a thing out in the distance, but the darkness could only barely be penetrated by our flashlights, until the lights came on. Every wall covered in openings, and in every opening, a coffin covered in frost. "It's a tomb. They all lie buried here," I muttered. The others behind me shivered. One of them screamed as a strange groaning sound could be heard getting closer. It was only a hard light walkway, but still, it was unnerving with its pale blue light shining over the chasm. I took the first step. One of my guards tried to reach out for me, but the walkway moved back from where it came, leaving the others behind, while I shot ahead to the strange thing I could see in the distance. Even with the lights on, I couldn't see the bottom of the chasm, nor the side I came from or the side I was approaching. "By the bones of the gods, there must be billions," I said as I came ever nearer to what looked like another computer interface. The hard light came to a new railing and cold metal walkway, hanging on a central column. I stepped off, and the hard light vanished. Nervously, I edged closer to the computer. It was far more advanced than anything I had ever seen before. As I admired it, it came to life, and with barely a second for me to react, it scanned my body. It didn't take long, and for a brief moment, everything was silent. But then the computer spoke to me, in a language I could understand. "Memories copied, languages assimilated, interface has adapted." I was shocked. From a brief second scan, it had copied my brain and all its memories. "Query: Are the species known as the Giorum still extant?" I shook my head. "Sorry, never heard of them." The computer's voice sounded cold and dispassionate as it spoke. "Query: Is the species known as the Uragotans still extant?" I answered the same as before to about 20 different races before it stopped. "Internal chronometer reset complete. 431 million Terran years since activation of last resort. Status of known enemies, extinct. Status of known alien empires, extinct. Status of unknown empires' technological capabilities compared to Terran levels, irrelevant. Beginning revival process now." I was alarmed at that statement, but not as scared as the sudden blaring alarms, which in perfect Gal Common stated, "All xenospecies, please disarm yourselves and cease your plundering of sovereign Terran property. Terran Central Government Emergency Act 65. All unclassified xeno-races are not allowed to keep weaponry of any kind due to ongoing conflict with the Concordat of Destin. Any who refuses to obey will be pacified and sent to be re-educated at the earliest possible moment." Several screens of the computer showed multiple locations, where I could see several of my colleagues on their assignments, scared out of their minds at this message. But the worst part was when the doors opened behind them. Several facilities like the one I was trapped in appeared to be located where my colleagues were studying their assignments. And out of the doors came tall, muscular, and terrifying beings, pointing armed weapons. Most places surrendered, but Taros the Willful tried to resist. I didn't like the little weirdo, but they crushed his skull and beat his guards. His team thankfully surrendered. But the brutality, the sheer efficiency of those soldiers. Not a single casualty on their side, but where we resisted, there wasn't given a whole lot of mercy. I'm not ashamed to admit it. At that point, I laid myself down and waited for death. I wasn't sure how it would come, but whatever was going on was a bit too much for my mind to process. And then I heard voices. Single target confirmed. Female. Appears harmless. It's the one who activated the process. I opened my eye and saw several hard light bridges extend towards me. One of them got closer to me and picked me up. It was nearly twice as tall as me. Looks like a squirrel. One of the others gently grasped my head. Huh. How about that four-eyed squirrel alien? One of them took off its mask and revealed a strange face, all angles and without any hair or fur. Right. Take it back to communications. Central wants a word with it. The maskless alien took out some kind of electrical device and with great care placed it around my neck. There we go. Compliance necklaces. Not the best morally, but all things considered, better than getting shot. Their voices had an after sound, as if they spoke something, but I heard something else slightly out of sync with the movement of their lips. They carried me back to a small room, which was being renovated somehow. Nanobots, maybe? All right, little lady, you just answer any and all questions and we won't have any problems, said one of the strange creatures. I looked as a screen was created before my eyes by what I can only assume was a gray swarm of nanomachines. Hello, Emda. The voice came from all around me. Do not be afraid. We're simply interested in answers, as we believe are you. I nodded, timidly. We have found that we have been asleep for, well, ages, and have woken to an unknown galaxy, ruled by this Trigalactic Federation, I believe it's called. I nodded again. Good. What does this Federation stand for? What are some core central tenets? I looked up, trying to seem a whole lot braver than I was. Freedom. Equal rights for all sentient life forms. The steady progression of science and technology. Peace and prosperity. Justice. The alien on the screen smiled. It was rather unnerving. Scary, even. Its teeth, white as ice, showed an almost predatory grin. Well then, that's interesting. That's good. I can assure you in general we believe in much the same things. It's good to finally meet other sensible races. The empires that existed when we did were of a less amiable character. It did not end well. I nod. We've theorized as much. You homulogs are the most ancient and mysterious culture we have ever heard of. The alien, its dark eyes gleaming, smiled at me again. What a curious name, but I think human is more appropriate. Don't you think? I tried to smile myself. Yeah, humans, yeah. An ancient race like this, with technology obviously eons ahead of ours. If they wanted to, they could rule the galaxies. Your government's ships have been disabled, as have your research stations. We're sending all survivors who did not resist to the ship you arrived in. We're going to tow it out of here, while we rebuild. Once we're finished rebuilding, we'd be honored to have you visit us on a more official capacity. After all, you're the little cute hero for us. You activated the manual failsafe after all. Without it, the broken automatic failsafe would have kept us in cryostasis until our sun went out. I tried to smile again. Glad to be of help. The female? Yes, female human looked at me again, her eyes filled with an almost manic glee. I am surprised that the joke code word got used, but that's neither here nor there. You'll be transported immediately to your ship. Then you'll all be given safe passage out of the Terran Galactic Republic. One of the guards grabbed my arm, and when I blinked my 4 eyes, I was suddenly back on the ship that had gotten me here. Others, scared, confused, collared like me, were huddling in the corners from the hulking tall humans. I awoke them, I thought. I've brought these strange and utterly unknown beings back from the brink, by the bones of my forebears. What have I let loose on this world? Meanwhile, at Terran Central Command. Nice aliens, don't you think? Jim nodded. It had been too long, he thought. Smaller than they used to be, though. Jim shrugged. All right, let's send them home. I can't believe they're still using slip space, so unsafe. Jim nodded. Agnes smiled. At least they seem harmless, mostly. That squirrel woman, Emda, was barely half my size. Agnes pressed a series of buttons on the touchscreen and sent out the aliens to the orbit of the closest of their colonies. Last time we faced off against genocidal monsters, mass slavers, religious orders so big that they sacrificed entire species to their gods at a time. Now, I think we've woken to a gentler galaxy, one unsuited for the horrors of eternal war and unending hatred. This time, I think we can do right. Jim nodded. Humanity is back, and this time, we'll be able to succeed where we once failed and help the myriad races of the galaxy to make a bright future for all of us.